Did you know that the death paintings like Chozo here are based on a real Buddhist painting? Or that Master Tengen and Jujutsu Kaisen's evil mastermind Kenjaku were homies over 1,000 years ago? Or what about the fact that Sukuna doesn't just kill people, he eats them as well, after cooking them in the malevolent kitchen, that is, of course. Because today we're diving down the Jujutsu Kaisen Iceberg, and in case you don't know, an iceberg video is basically a collection of all of the most obscure lore, theories, and facts that a particular topic has to offer, starting at the tip of the iceberg above the sea level with facts about Jujutsu Kaisen that even the most casual fan should know, like the fact that there are exactly 4 special great sorcerers, down to the deepest and darkest depths with ideas that even the most hardcore fans have probably never heard about, like the fact that Ryomen Sukuna was actually a real person that lived in ancient Japan. Let's raise our domain expansion and explore. Tier level 1. And the first step on our journey into the cursed depths of the Jujutsu Kaisen Iceberg is that Kenjaku is in fact Yuji's mother. Kenjaku, the body-hopping ultimate villain of Jujutsu Kaisen, who has been pulling the strings behind the scenes for over 1,000 years, has worked for centuries and centuries to finally enact the culling games. But as we saw when we were treated to a few of Kenjaku's past lives, one of these was actually no one other than Kaori Itadori, Yuji's mother, who is seen bearing Kenjaku's trademark forehead scars. And we just hope that one day author Gege Akutami's love of pop culture references allow Kenjaku to treat us to a Star Wars-like reference as Yuji faces down the big bad, only for him to say, "Yuji, I am your mother." And actually, speaking of pop culture references in Jujutsu Kaisen, what is an ungodly powerful character like Satoru Gojo actually supposed to do in their free time? Well, as one of the certified top 5 hottest anime men of all time, I'm sure that he could be getting plenty of dates probably, but nothing will ever be able to fill the unlimited void in his heart like his departed BFF Suguro Geto. And therefore he has to satisfy his nerdy interests with hobbies that will appeal to only the truest of anime fans. Namely, Gojo loves Digimon. When Geto and Gojo are charged with delivering the Star Plasma Vessel to prevent Tengen's evolution, Gojo understands the situation by comparing it to his favorite series, that the Star Vessel will reset Tengen back to Koromon and prevent him from evolving into a deadly form like Skullgreymon. And this Easter egg goes especially deep actually when you realize that both Gojo's English and Japanese voice actors have voiced minor characters in Digimon itself. And so if you're a real Digimon fan, just wait, because this isn't the last time that we'll be jumping into the digital world in this iceberg actually. And as you know, in Jujutsu Kaisen we also meet lots of other special great cursed spirits like the disaster curses or just about anyone who can get their hands on a Sukuna finger. However, on the sorcerer end of things, there are only 4 known special great curse users. Those are Satoru Gojo, Suguru Geto, Yuki Tsukumo, and Yuta Okotsu. They're all 4 ranked as special grade, which essentially means that their curse techniques exhibit unlimited potential. But besides just broken curse techniques, they also have access to just absurdly massive reservoirs of cursed energy that go exponentially beyond your average sorcerer. Some characters even say that sorcerers of this level could probably take on an entire nation single-handedly. And what are these techniques? Well, Gojo's technique is literally limitless. Suguru Geto could command an army of cursed spirits. Yuta can copy any cursed technique that he wishes, and Yuki can just casually create a black hole. In other words, these sorcerers are truly on another level, but it makes me wonder which characters may still become special grade sorcerers, or which other new special grade characters that we haven't known about yet may still be introduced in the future of the series. Especially since some of these characters are now out of the picture. But now, ever since Sukuna first saw Megumi Fushiguro, dude's been obsessed. Clearly, Sukuna really wanted a body that is a bit easier to control than stubborn Yuji, who is somehow able to take back control from the King of Curses. However, out of all of the powerful jutsu sorcerers, Sukuna has his eyes on Megumi as his ideal vessel. And this basically comes down to the technique that Megumi has inherited from the Zain clan, the 10 Shadow technique. Now this power basically allows Megumi to utilize the powers of 10 different shikigami, however he still hasn't managed to gain full control of all of them. And then during the culling games, Sukuna finally got his hands on Megumi's body. I mean, that just sounds wrong. Sukuna was finally able to switch from Yuji's body to Megumi's and was able to use the power of the Mahoraga, whose ability to adapt to any any situation and any ability in battle, even allowed him to take out the most powerful sorcerer, Satoru Gojo. And actually, from the very first chapter of Jujutsu Kaisen, the death flags that we have been getting for Yuji Itadori have been there right along. For one, when Yuji's grandfather passed away, providing our protagonist with his tragic backstory, he left him with some parting words. He told Yuji that he's a strong kid and that he should help others. And he also said to die surrounded by friends and to not be like him. However, fans of Jujutsu Kaisen have taken another character's death, that of Principal Yaga, to create a wild theory about character's last words. Because when Yaga dies, he tells the principal of the Kyoto Jujutsu High School that he will be passing a curse onto him. Now, some fans have taken that very literally, speculating that character's last words might actually become literal curses. And if that should be true, then Yuji is actually fated to die within the series, surrounded by friends. Die again, we should say, because this guy did have his heart ripped out after all before, and he's still up and kicking. And next up, Kinji Hakari's cursed energy is just built completely different. Some sorcerers' cursed energy seems to have special qualities that give it a sort of texture or secondary effect. And by some sorcerers, I do mean exactly two. Hakari and Hajime Kashimo, one of the sorcerers incarnated during the Culling game who conveniently fought each other at one point in the story. Now, Hakari's cursed energy has been described as being rough or sharp, allowing his blunt punches to have a cutting effect. On the other hand, Kashimo's cursed energy is like electricity. The fact that his overwhelming amount of cursed energy behaves like an electrical current means that his physical attacks are effectively impossible to defend against since they electrocute his opponents. And as you know, every Naruto needs a Sasuke, which means the edgier and literally more shadowy of Jujutsu Kaisen heroes might just turn evil, according to many fans. In a way, that has technically already happened, at least with Megumi's body, now that Sukuna is using his body to cause all sorts of carnage throughout the Culling games. However, many fans have actually speculated that Megumi would turn to the dark side long before this particular plot twist actually happened. With Megumi's beloved stepsister Tsukimi being the victim of Kenjaku's curse that lulled her into a coma, Megumi would stop at nothing to break the curse and revive her. It was even speculated that he might ally himself with the side of evil if it meant saving his sister. Now, of course, leave it to Gege Akutami to take a popular fan theory, reject it, and then come up with a story development that caused 1,000 times more psychological damage to his readers. Yuji Itadori isn't just the star of an anime, he's a longtime fan. Jujutsu Kaisen is no stranger to making pop culture references, as we mentioned earlier, to real-life celebrities or to other media. For example, when Gojo is first teaching Yuji about how to control his cursed energy, he explains how most sorcerers can channel their energy into a special curse technique unique to the user. For instance, Gojo has his limitless technique. Yuji is fired up to learn his very own special attack, but is absolutely heartbroken when Gojo reveals that he doesn't seem to have any natural talent for using a natural curse technique. And of course, Yuji is devastated, saying that he wanted to be able to pull off a spirit gun, a bankai, a Rasengan, or a Dodonrei. And big-time anime fans will recognize all of these as the signature attacks of characters from some of their other favorite series. Spirit gun was the primary attack of the spirit detective Yusuke Urameshi from YuYu Hakusho. A bankai is of course the ultimate attack of the Shinigami from Bleach. Naruto Uzumaki's special move is the chakra-based Rasengan, and with the last one, Yuji proves he's a true fan and not just a poser. Because a lesser man would maybe have settled for a Kamehameha, but he chose the Dodonrei, the signature move of the Dragon Ball villain Mercenary Tao. Now, speaking of Sukuna's curse techniques, it seems like he has multiple, which, hey, that's breaking the rules that every Jujutsu sorcerer should only be able to wield one single curse technique, but there are a couple of exceptions. For one, Kenjaku is able to possess multiple techniques, but only because he has inhabited multiple bodies. Yuta, of course, is also able to use other curse techniques, but that's because his curse techniques is to copy the technique of others. And so in other words, Sukuna is a completely different case. His curse technique seems to have something to do with powerful cutting attacks, allowing him to cleave enemies apart. However, he also finished off Jogo with a fire-based move that was strong enough to burn a literal volcano curse to ashes. In other words, someday we definitely need an answer to what Sukuna's actual curse technique is and why he has access to multiple. As you know, Sukuna's power is locked behind his 20 cursed fingers, relics that his power was actually sealed within during the Heian era so that he couldn't be resurrected in the future. And so far, with each single finger that Yuji has consumed, Sukuna's power have grown exponentially stronger, getting closer to the full strength that he possessed when he was originally alive. However, so far, 19 fingers are accounted for, and the last one only remains a mystery. Now, Sukuna himself speculates that it was in Gojo's possession because he thought that the sorcerer might be hiding it away so that Yuji would never obtain the last one and therefore wouldn't need to be executed by the Jutsu higher-ups. However, even though Gojo is now sadly out of the picture, the truth of the final finger is still unknown. So was Sukuna's hunch right, or does he still need to hunt for the remains of his power? Now tell me this, what's a villain to do when he's waiting for his evil plan to come true? Well, if you're Kenjaku, you pass the time with a nice board game. Specifically, there is one scene where Kenjaku, Mahito, and Choso are all playing the very real board game, the game of life. That's of course very ironic because these three characters in particular are almost playing at being human. Kenjaku is just a brain inhabiting someone else's body, Mahito is the human curse, but ultimately is a curse, not an actual human, and as a death painting, Choso is kind of in between being curse and human at the same time. But there's also a second level to this metaphor here, given that Kenjaku is constantly playing games with the lives of others. In fact, his master plan is to create the Culling Game, a game in which the participants are literally fighting for their lives. In other words, this tiny scene of a board game is massive foreshadowing and character development at its best. Okay, do I even need to explain this one? Just look at that season 2 anime opening, for crying out loud. Are Gojo and Geto sharing a ride on a tandem bicycle platonically? Okay, so the actual text of the series does insist that they are just best friends forever, but that hasn't stopped Gojo x Geto fans from being one of the most popular ships to come out of the entire Jujutsu Kaisen fanbase. But really, no matter the nature of their relationship, these two do share a special bond. Their immense strength isolated both of them, but in each other they found a rival and also someone who could understand their own experiences. And even though they were later driven to become enemies, the connection between them never really died. But we're just getting started when it comes to this iceberg, because if you thought that these theories were crazy, then you just wait what we have coming up when we activate our innate technique in tier number 2. While Yuji and Aoi Todo are fighting during the Kyoto Sister School Goodwill event, Todo suddenly has a strange sort of hallucination. He has a flashback to a past filled with joyous memories spent with his brother, Yuji. And then suddenly, he's convinced that he and Itadori are actual brothers who have grown up together. Now, at first, this seemed to be just a gag, but after the exact same thing happened during Yuji's fight with Choso, that's when things got really suspicious. Was this some sort of special curse technique on Yuji's end? Well, we'll speculate even more about that later on, but sometimes the simplest solution is the best one. Maybe Todo actually is Itadori's brother. After all, since Choso was revealed to kind of actually be Yuji's half-brother, I guess, since both of them technically share Kenjaku as a parent, maybe Todo really is his actual long-lost brother. In other words, is Todo just the illegitimate child of Kenjaku and or Yuji's mysterious father? Only time will tell. Kenjaku's body hopping power has some really interesting quirks. It does seem that not only does he gain the bodies and powers of his victims, but also their memories and even some of their personality traits. Now, it's kind of unclear how much one of his bodies might be able to exert its will and fight back against Kenjaku's control, but while Gojo was being sealed by the prison realm and Kenjaku used Geto's body and voice to distract him, Gojo taunted Geto, asking if he was really going to let someone anyone else use his body like that. And when he said this, the seemingly impossible happened and Geto's hand attempted to strangle himself. In other words, it really looked a lot like the deceased Geto was still in there somewhere trying to fight back against Kenjaku. Which of course in turn raises the question of whether Geto at some point will actually be able to regain control of his body. And I do think that it would make total sense if in a moment of extreme conflict when things were looking truly terrible for our heroes, Geto would be actually able to hold back Kenjaku for a moment and save the day. That way Geto can actually somewhat redeem himself for his villainous actions before and then reuniting with Gojo in the afterlife. Oh boy, this has to be one of the greatest memes surrounding this very highly memeified series. And so people will take panels from the manga and then edit out the dialogue, so it goes something like, person number 1, this sure was a Jujutsu Kaisen, to which person number 2 will respond, no, this was our Jujutsu Kaisen. And this is of course a reference to all the cheesy ways that a lot of movies will work the title of the movie into the dialogue. However, this particular joke here actually works especially well since so few English fans actually know what Jujutsu Kaisen actually means. That's because most anime titles usually are translated into English when they arrive in English-speaking markets, but JJK is just one of those few rare exceptions where it retains its untranslated Japanese title. Kimetsu no Yaiba became Demon Slayer, Shingeki no Kyojin became Attack on Titan, some like One Piece or Bleach even just have an English title to begin with in Japanese, but Jujutsu Kaisen literally translates to something like sorcery battle, even though some of the kanji in the title are actually just straight up made up. But the fact that English fans are confused by the title of the story kind of paved the perfect pathway for this particular meme. No, Nanami isn't a delicious pastry, though according to TikTok, plenty of people do seem to think that he's downright delicious. Nope, his part of his family just comes from Denmark. Nanami's maternal grandfather was Danish, which makes this sorcerer a quarter Dane. That explains why he has blonde hair and blue eyes, quite the rarity in Japan, but extremely common, especially in Northern Europe. And I mean, proving that rule. Other Nanami fun facts include that he was one of the first characters that Gege designed for Jujutsu Kaisen, and his design was originally intended to be a villain. Also, his favorite food is bread. Now, this is completely unrelated to the other fun fact, but Gege told us that his favorite food is bread, so now you get to know about that, I guess. You were a real one, Nanami. We'll see you in Malaysia. Megumi Fushigoro's curse technique is the 10 Shadows technique, which he uses to summon beasts called shikigami, shadow monsters, to fight alongside him. These include his divine dogs, his go-to shikigami. For serial attacking, he depends on the winged Nue, and when he needs to make use of serious tongue action, he can call upon Todo. Then for some real power, he has the Great Serpent and Max Elephant. Rabbit Escape allows Megumi to summon an entire swarm of rabbits to serve as a distraction. Round Deer can actually use reverse curse technique to heal, and Piercing Ox is one of Megumi's most powerful attackers. And finally, he has the 8-handled sword. And then finally, he has the 8-handled sword Divergent Sila Divine General. And finally, he has the 8-handled sword Divergent Sila Divine General Mahoraga, which is not a mouthful to say at all, and I definitely nailed it on the first try saying this. Totally. I could talk and theorize about all of these shikigami all day, but if you're familiar at all with counting, then you'll realize that that was actually only 9 of the 10 shadows. Now, some people have argued that the divine dogs count as 2, but if that's the case, then what about all those rabbits? Because adding those in, you might as well call it the like 89 shadow technique. And so it really does seem like Gege Akutami is saving one shadow for a truly intense moment of the series, but the question is how it's possibly going to outclass Mahoraga, a shikigami so incredibly strong that no user of the 10 shadow technique has ever been able to get it to submit to their will. Well, at least until now. I've already mentioned some of the ways that Jujutsu Kaisen has referenced real pop culture like Digimon and other anime. However, Jujutsu Kaisen doesn't restrict itself to only referencing video games and animated properties. This series also just references real life movies and actors like a lot. The most memorable case of this is probably Yuji talking about how he has a massive crush on actress Jennifer Lawrence and even owning a poster of her in the anime. However, this isn't the only reference to a real-life movie star. Momo crushes on Sebastian Stan, who played the Winter Soldier in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, and while Yuji is doing his cursed energy control training while watching movies, it appears that among the movies that he's watching are a Tom Cruise-style action flick and, of course, Lord of the Rings. And when Yuji and Junpei are hanging out and talking about movies, Yuji does an impression of Tom Hanks in Castaway by screaming, "Wilson!" as well. Now, this isn't where it ends though, because the DVDs that Gojo holds up to Yuji are actually real DVD covers as well. They include Leon the Professional, The Host, The Descent, Deep Blue Sea, which he also spoils the ending of, and The Emperor's Naked Army Marches On, which I'm about to look up on every streaming service based on just that title alone, I guess. Toge Inumaki has one of the highest potentials out of any of the Tokyo Jujutsu students. In fact, his clan's cursed speech ability is just so broken that Gege has to handicap Toge with the handicap of making his attacks wreck his own throat, to the point that he coughs up blood if he uses too many attacks in a row. As a result, Toge actively avoids speaking in anything other than onigiri ingredients just to avoid accidentally cursing his own allies or harming them. And if he's worried about what he could possibly do by accident, just what is the potential of this ability when he's using it in combat and once Toge has grown stronger? With a large enough stockpile of cursed energy, what kind of commands could he give enemies beyond what we've seen in the series? And what might his domain expansion look like? Could it be as deadly as Gojo's, where someone only needs to hear Toge's voice to lose the entire battle? Curses in Jujutsu Kaisen gain their strength from humans' negative emotions. In fact, the most powerful curses are associated with specific fears. For instance, Jogo's power comes from people's fear of volcanoes and other fire-related disasters. Mahito gets his power from people's fear of humans themselves, so what would make the strongest curse of all? A curse based on darkness? Fear? What about a curse based on the fear of all of the other curses? As some people have speculated, this theoretical curse could be the strongest curse imaginable. In other words, is that what Sukuna actually is? Is that what makes him the king of curses? Or would Sukuna himself quake in his boots if he ever came face to face with the curse himself? Tengen is by far one of the most mysterious characters in all of Jujutsu Kaisen. She is 1,000 years old and so powerful that she began evolving beyond humanity itself. She lives in a secret chamber far below Jujutsu High, where she generates the protective barriers that keep Japan's curses at bay and protect important locations in the Jujutsu society. And also, this figure was friends with Kenjaku a long time ago. And you might have been surprised that I said she here, because their appearance doesn't really look human at all anymore, so it's really hard to determine a gender for this four-eyed individual. Not four eyes as in they wear glasses, four eyes in the most literal sense possible. One important clue was that the known star vessels who had the potential to merge with Tengen were Yuki and Riko, both of whom were women, but then Tengen also mentions it herself. Jujutsu Kaisen started off with a one-shot manga called Jujutsu Kaisen 0, which was also made into a popular prequel movie. The hero of Jujutsu Kaisen 0 was actually Yuta Okotsu, the special great sorcerer who still plays a very important role in the series. However, once Jujutsu Kaisen actually launched as an official series in Shonen Jump, Yuta was nowhere to be found, and instead fans were introduced to Yuji and Megumi as the main characters. The original short series, which first had the title Tokyo Metropolitan Curse Technical School, well, that just rolls off the tongue I guess, was never intended to be serialized as a long-running series actually. However, once Jujutsu Kaisen was picked up for the long run, Akutami thought that Yuta's story arc had essentially already been completed and wanted a more peppy, outgoing character for his shonen series instead. As a result, Itadori was born. However, can you see how many inspirations Gege took from his original series, especially the haircut? In Jujutsu Kaisen 0, Toge and Yuta's hairstyles are basically identical to Yuji's and Megumi's, and they basically adopted their new looks for Jujutsu Kaisen. Now, I've already mentioned like 5 times how the series makes tons of references to real-life celebrities, as well as pop culture references to other anime and movies. However, Gege also incorporates a lot of real-life locations into Jujutsu Kaisen as well. The most obvious examples is having the Shibuya incident take place in the real-life Shibuya station in Tokyo. However, Gege takes his dedication to portraying these real-life locations very, very seriously. If you search online, you can find tons of side-by-side comparisons where people impose manga panels over their actual counterparts, and the amount of detail put into replicating Shibuya is just insane. It just really goes to show how Gege wants to portray his series as having grounded characters who inhabit a real world. Our world. I mean, I'm in Tokyo right now. Another great real-life location though, and one that's been mentioned to death, is Kentucky Fried Chicken. Now, Western fans might be surprised to know that KFC is actually really popular in Japan. And another one of the real-life places that Gege included was having Geto and Gojo have their fateful last conversation, or as some people call it, their breakup, on a real-life city street here in Tokyo. Eagle-eyed fans who have sought out this location in real life have determined that Gojo and Geto actually break up right in front of a Kentucky Fried Chicken, which is not finger-licking good. And now for another meme-worthy moment, this time from Jujutsu Kaisen Season 2. Near the end of the Shibuya incident, Sukuna has taken control of Yuji's body and has caused absolute carnage throughout Tokyo. Thousands, if not tens of thousands of civilians are dead, entire buildings have been flattened, and as Yuji comes back to consciousness and takes control of his body again, he is stunned as he looks out upon the destruction. And he knows that it was he, or his body at least, that has caused it. Tears begin to flow, and even though he wasn't in control, he knows that his own two hands have brought tons of innocent people to their end. He falls to his knees and begins pounding the ground, cursing his fate, and then we hear it. The perfect soundtrack for this gut-wrenching moment, You Are My Special. Now, it's not uncommon for us to hear the opening of an anime in the last episodes of a season, but when it contrasts with this absolutely tragic moment, it kind of turned one of the saddest moments in the series to one of the funniest. And so as a result, all of the most tear-jerking scenes in anime history have been put to this song. What actually happens when you break a binding vow? As you might remember, a binding vow is a contract made through cursed energy, either with oneself or with others. These type of vows often give a cursed technique certain rules or restrictions in exchange for granting it more power. For example, Nanami's overtime makes it so that he can only access 80 to 90% of his power while he's still on the clock, but as soon as he begins to work overtime, he can then output 110% of his regular power. However, yet other vows are between sorcerers, such as the pact made between Sukuna and Yuji, allowing Sukuna to access his body for 1 minute after he says "and chain" in exchange for resurrecting Yuji after removing his heart. Now, it's actually suggested that breaking a binding vow has terrible consequences, but what actually are those? Do you die? Do you lose all of your cursed energy? It's kind of unclear what actually happens. However, since the author has hinted towards truly gruesome consequences, we can only hope that by the end of the series, it will be revealed what actually happens if such a vow is broken. And to be completely honest with you, so far my own personal binding vow has prevented me from giving you the juiciest Jujutsu Kaisen lore out there, but I'm going to take the ultimate risk now and break it in order to bring you Tier 3. A vengeful spirit is a specific type of cursed spirit that occurs when a human dies a cursed death. Now, Jujutsu sorcerers have a heightened chance of becoming a vengeful spirit should they die by means other than Jujutsu. One of the most notable examples here is Rika, a cursed spirit born after the death of Yuta's childhood friend who fights alongside him. Or another one is Naoya Zane, who was transformed into a vengeful spirit after Maki slaughtered the Zane clan. He then turned into this form because Maki's heavenly restriction means that she doesn't have any cursed energy, therefore he wasn't killed by Jujutsu. As a result, it seems like the more powerful the human or sorcerer, the more powerful the vengeful spirit will be. Rika is actually a bit of an exception because it was mostly Yuta's crazy amount of cursed energy and his refusal to let go the death of his friend that really helped make her into a special grade cursed spirit. However, that has now made a lot of fans really curious as to what might happen if the world's strongest sorcerer becomes one of those vengeful spirits, in other words, Satoru Gojo. So, in other words, if Gojo was somehow killed by something other than Jujutsu, he would probably be a curse even more terrifying than Sukuna, and all of Jujutsu society would probably be completely powerless to stop him. Now, I just mentioned Naoya Zen, the arrogant youngest son of Naobito Zen, and Naoya was not having it when it turned out that Megumi would be the heir of the Zen clan. He was full of resentment and wanted to be the head of the family himself. And then after Maki slaughtered all of the Zen, Naoya's desire for revenge lived on as he became a vengeful spirit with the sole aim of killing Maki. However, Naoya didn't just turn into a regular vengeful spirit, he turned into a Digimon. Or more accurately, he turned into a vengeful spirit that looks exactly like a Digimon. Back in the year 2000, Toei Animation released Digimon Adventure: Our War Game, a Digimon movie directed by the very acclaimed animator Mamoru Hosoda. The villain of this movie is the corrupted Digimon Diablomon, and one of this antagonist's pre-evolutions is Infermon, an armored spider-like creature that can contract its limbs into its body to create a missile form. And let's be real, there is a definite resemblance between this Digimon and Naoya's cursed spirit form, though Jujutsu Kaisen's version definitely looks more, well, cursed. However, we already know that Gege is no stranger to making Digimon references, so I really wouldn't put this one past him. So far, Jujutsu Kaisen viewers have met 3 of the Cursed Womb death paintings. There's fan-favorite character Chozo, the blood manipulator who betrayed Kenjaku after realizing that Yuji was his brother. Then there are Chozo's departed brothers Eso and Kechisu, who were defeated by Yuji and Kugisaki. However, it's been stated that Kenjaku created 9 death paintings. So just like with Megumi's Shikigami, there's still something missing here. But in this case, it's not just 1 out of the 10 shadows, it's 6 out of the total 9. And now for a little bonus fun fact here, whew, love those. The reason that there are 9 death paintings is that this is actually a reference to a piece of Buddhist art called the Kuzozu, or the 9-phase diagram, which depicts the 9 phases of a decomposing corpse. So I really wonder if that means that the final death painting is just a skeleton or cremated ashes, or are they just inspired by name alone? We'll only really get to know if Gege finally decided to reveal Chozo's other 6 siblings, and we get to see the death paintings that are still in storage at Tokyo Jujutsu High. However, due to this painting, we can guess the names of all of the other death paintings, since Chozo, Ezo, and Kechizu are all named for specific parts of the Kuzozu paintings as well. And so in case you're curious, the other siblings' names will be Noranso, Shouso, Tenso, Sanso, Kotsuzo, and Shoso. And honestly, fingers crossed that someday we'll hopefully actually meet all of the remaining members of this really strange family. Oh, and speaking of the death painting family members, we of course can't forget the secret 10th brother, Yuji Itadori himself. As the son of his mother Kenjaku, Yuji is a half-sibling of Chozo and the other death paintings. Or maybe half isn't the correct fraction here, since the death paintings sort of have 3 parents, their mother, a cursed spirit, and Kenjaku, who mixed his blood with them while he was in Norito Shikamo's body. So he's like a 2/5 sibling of Yuji, like something like that. However, even though they were powerful, Kenjaku ultimately determined that the death paintings were a failure. They didn't really transcend his own power like he originally hoped. However, Kenjaku has had hundreds of years since then to perfect the formula, which brings me to the theory that Yuji himself might be the perfected death painting. Because Kenjaku is a villain who does everything in a really calculated way, trying to perfect all his plans and schemes as much as possible. And so it's kind of doubtful that he just birthed Yuji because he was ready to experience the joys of motherhood. So much more likely, it wasn't just coincidence that Yuji turned out to be a perfect vessel for Sukuna. Yuji was probably designed or engineered in some way specifically for this purpose. In fact, Kenjaku probably chose Yuji's father very carefully, and it's likely that he has a special ancestry on his dad's side as well that gives him unique potential as a sorcerer that we just don't know about yet. Satoru Gojo is one of the greatest teachers in all of manga. He cares deeply for all of his students, he stands up for Yuji and Yuta, who are both deemed threats to the Jujutsu Society, and takes them under his wing instead of allowing them to be straight up executed. He trains Megumi personally and becomes like a real father figure to him after he kills his actual dad. In other words, yeah, Gojo really cares for his students deeply, which makes it really weird that he has never interacted with Kugisaki one-on-one like ever. Like, please, correct me if I'm wrong here, but even though Gojo spends time personally training Megumi and Yuji and Yuta, I'm pretty positive he never teaches anything to Kugisaki in a one-on-one setting, at least as far as we know. And this is especially funny because, at least in the area of arrogance, she probably takes after her teacher the most out of any of the other students. So maybe if she'd had a little bit more one-on-one attention in the classroom, she would still be with us today. Or maybe she is. Who knows? Fight Club boss and resident drip god Kinji Hakari is currently suspended from the Jujutsu High for assaulting one of the higher-ups. Now, I've already talked about his unusually sharp cursed energy, but now it's time to talk about his domain expansion. And as far as I'm concerned, his Idle Death Gamble is the strangest domain expansion in the entire series. Because it creates a game called The Private Pure Love Train, themed after a romance manga of that name, and which is apparently based on a real pachinko machine that does exist in the real world. And if Hakari hits a jackpot in this pachinko game, he gets a giant boost to his cursed power. But he only has a 1 in 239 chance of actually winning a jackpot, but if he does, he enters unkillable mode for 4 minutes and 7 seconds, coincidentally the exact duration of the Private Pure Love Train theme song, which plays within the domain for that time. And in his unkillable mode, Hakari gains access to an unlimited amount of cursed energy, which means that he can use reverse curse technique to reflexively heal any and all injuries. However, we already know that Hakari also runs a fight club where he actively fixes the fights to make money. And given that Hakari got multiple jackpots in quick succession in his fights, I'm betting that his chances aren't actually 1 in 239. Instead, as the owner of the establishment, the odds are very likely rigged in his own favor. But now let's actually talk about another wild innate technique that was a real blink and miss it moment. Because one of the several techniques that Kenjaku has collected over the centuries is called the anti-gravity system. During his battle with Yuki and Chozo, he revealed a technique that massively increased the gravity in the area in order to weigh down his opponents. However, in a last-ditch effort before she died, Yuki used her ability to control mass to essentially create a black hole which would theoretically pull in and crush Kenjaku. However, he escaped, and he revealed after the fact that he was actually using the reversed curse technique when he increased the gravity, and that the actual power was anti-gravity, which allowed him to escape the pull of the black hole. But maybe the craziest part of this power is that it belonged to Kaori Itadori, Yuji's mother, before he took over her body. And since he's possessed the bodies of very notable sorcerers over the centuries, it just makes me even more suspicious that Yuji's family is a lot more important than we actually know. Now, I've already talked about that we're not quite sure what Sukuna's cursed technique is or what his cursed techniques are, if the speculation that he has multiple is actually true. However, a lot of the fan base is pretty sure that Yuji is going to learn whatever cursed technique that is. That's because when Yuji first learned about innate techniques, he was absolutely dismayed when Gojo told him that he showed zero natural ability for using any of these special techniques. And if you remember, that's what I talked about earlier when Yuji actually wanted to use a Rasengan. However, despite Yuji's despair, Gojo believes that there is hope that eventually some of Sukuna's cursed techniques will actually be engraved within Yuji himself, giving him basically access to powerful special moves. And so housing the powerful Sukuna inside his body for such a long time is sure to have some sort of effect, and part of that means that some of Sukuna's strength will also end up rubbing off on Yuji. In fact, in chapter 233 of the manga, Yuji was able to hit Sukuna, who was inhabiting Megumi's body at the time, and the guy really gets around. Now, to be fair, it didn't cause that much damage, but Sukuna had a clear look of surprise on his face that Yuji was even able to face him at all, which may mean that our hero is due for a really big power-up that fans definitely hope includes a cursed technique of his very own. Gegako Tami, the creator of Jujutsu Kaisen, and Kohei Horikoshi, the creator of My Hero Academia, are actually super close friends in real life. So yeah, it must be nice to have a bestie who can relate to all of the pressure of being a mangaka. After all, the daily schedule of a manga artist is basically like being placed in a blender for 20 hours of the day and then suffering while waiting for your contractual 4 hours of sleep. So I guess it's kind of nice to hear that these two can actually find time to spend some quality time together. What do two of the most successful manga artists in the world do together? Well, rumor has it that they've gone to watch movies together, checking out some Neon Genesis Evangelion, and given the timeline, this was most likely Evangelion 3.0 plus 1.0 Thrice Upon a Time, which was released in 2021 and doesn't have a confusing or weird title at all, I must say. Apparently, Horikoshi has also stated that Mahito is his favorite Jujutsu Kaisen character, which has me personally concerned for Horikoshi's mental health, I think, but I mean, we'll see how the rest of My Hero turns out anyways. Speaking of Mahito being the worst, let's talk a little bit about Junpei. Now, if this was a normal shonen, Junpei probably would have turned against Mahito and ended up becoming part of the gang and joining Yuji as a student at Jujutsu High, as it was kind of promised in the original opening. But this is not a normal shonen, so he became a platypus instead and died a horrific death. You know, Kugisaki and Nanami style, except Junpei did it before it was cool, if you get my drift. Now, after Junpei's arc was already over, Gege made comments that he wished that he'd included more scenes of Junpei, and he wanted to show more of Junpei's kindness so that his death would hurt the audience even more than it already did. And well, his wish was then granted by MAPPA, who actually added some anime-only scenes to endear Junpei even more to the audience before then ending up to kill him horribly. Seriously, where is Aoi Todo? Because last we saw him, Aoi said "owie" when Mahito blew up his arm, and this unfortunately prevents Todo from using his boogie woogie technique ever again, which requires him to clap in order to switch places with his targets. However, cutting his arm off was a small price to pay in exchange for himself not blowing up, I guess. Unfortunately, the fanbase hasn't seen their favorite buff guy sorcerer since the Shibuya incident. Almost every character, at least the ones that are still alive, have shown up to take part in the culling games in some way or form. Fans also wondered where characters like Noritoshi Kamo were until we got an explanation that he just noped his way out of the entire country to protect his family. Really shows how much faith he has in the good guys to stop Kenjaku's master plan. However, Todo has been just completely absent. You'd think he would at least show up in a couple of panels to say, hey guys, I'd love to help out with all this whole Sukuna problem, but I'm missing my arm, so I'ma sit this one out. So really, here's to hoping that Gegako Tami is saving him to drop in when things are at his worst. Who knows, maybe he'll even find out that he actually can still use his curse technique by clapping something else. Use your imagination. Now, I've already talked about how Sukuna seems to have multiple curse techniques, even though the limit for a sorcerer is supposed to be just one. He uses his powerful cutting techniques, but also was able to use fire well enough to burn a volcano curse to death. And lots of fans have speculated on what exactly the connection between these two very different techniques could be, basically leading to the theory that Sukuna is the Gordon Ramsay of the Jujutsu Kaisen world. That is to say, in his past life, 1,000 years ago during the Heian era when he was human, Sukuna was a chef. Think about it. Chefs have to chop up ingredients, so they need insanely fast knife skills. However, they also need to have control over fire so that they can cook their dishes perfectly. And it just makes you wonder what other chef-related skills Sukuna could pull out. Is he gonna whisk the other sorcerers in the culling game to death? Beat them like an egg? And actually, Sukuna being a chef would finally give us an answer for why Crunchyroll decided to translate his domain expansion as Malevolent Kitchen instead of what it actually is, which is Malevolent Shrine. After all, where do chefs work? Not a shrine as far as I know, but it does also beg the question of how many Michelin stars Sukuna's fine malevolent establishment has actually earned at this point. Oh, excuse me, what's the soup of the day? Carnage. Now, this very unusual translation also has led to a huge wave of memes, as you can imagine. Cue a million pictures floating around online with a chef's head photoshopped on Sukuna. And I will never know exactly what was going through that translator's head. Were they trying to viral marketing on purpose, or did they simply call Sukuna's domain the Malevolent Kitchen because he's cooking. But now it's time for me to turn up the heat in my own malevolent kitchen here, because from here on out, the theories are going to be absolute fire. And that's because we're now in tier 4. What is Yuji's actual curse technique? I've already speculated on a few options so far, such as him gaining access to Sukuna's powers. However, some fans think that his curse technique has already been revealed. And it all has to do with what we talked about all the way up back at tier level 2, with both Aoi, Todo, and Chozo having sudden revelations during their battles with Yuji that he's actually their brother. Because some people think that this is a lot more than just coincidence or a gag, and actually hints at a special power that Yuji possesses: memory manipulation. The idea basically goes that Yuji was unconsciously using his curse technique all along, reshaping his opponent's memories. After all, in both cases, the opponent doesn't just come to a realization that Yuji is their brother, they have vivid memories of actually growing up alongside Yuji. So did our hero actually just implant these memories inside their brains without even knowing it? Now, unfortunately for this theory, Gege Akutami has actually denied that this is Itadori's technique, and it's not as though a mangaka would ever lie. Right? Or am I just remembering that wrong and that was just a memory that he implanted in me? You know, we might just be reading too much into JJK if we're coming up with wild theories like that. And so let's get away from the wild theories for a second and go back to a totally normal one, believe me. Okay, this one does sound a little bit outlandish, but trust me, Sukuna being a cannibalist has actually been confirmed. According to Akutami, Sukuna has a taste for human flesh, and apparently his servant, 𝗨𝗟𝗧𝗜𝗍, is an expert at preparing bodies for consumption. However, maybe he likes to do a little bit of cooking for himself now and then. We've actually just talked about how Sukuna might actually be a chef, but what would the world's most evil chef's specialty be? What exactly would he cook inside that malevolent kitchen of his? Well, people, if this theory is to be believed. Think about it. How does Yuji gain Sukuna's power again? Oh, by eating fingers? Sounds like a cannibalism to me. How does Sukuna transfer to Megumi's body? More cannibalism? Really, when it comes to Sukuna, it's just cannibalism all the way. Like, this seems to be a perfectly suitable crime to earn someone the title of King of Curses. All curses love to kill people, but it does take a truly awful curse to make murder into a Michelin-starred experience. Then another popular theory also stated that Sukuna cannibalized someone very specific, his own twin within the womb. Now, to be fair, that certainly wouldn't be the single worst thing that Akutami has written about fetuses, looking at you death paintings. But since Maki and Mai have revealed to us that twins are considered the same person in terms of their cursed energy, this cannibalism would be one factor explaining Sukuna's insane power and maybe also his multiple techniques. Vengeful spirits aren't an original creation unique to Jujutsu Kaisen. In Shinto, vengeful spirits, or onryo, are ghosts that have come back to the world of the living to seek revenge, just like in JJK. However, in Japan, there are 3 of these vengeful spirits that reign supreme. These 3 are known as Emperor Sutoku, Taira no Masakado, and Sugawara no Michizane. And at least one of these, though, does actually exist in Jujutsu Kaisen as well, or at least did in the past. And he's actually referenced in the context of the 3 great vengeful spirits, so we can assume that if one is real in Jujutsu Kaisen, then the other 2 probably are as well. And these spirits from a bygone era are among the most powerful beings in existence in the Jujutsu Kaisen universe, even rivaling monsters like Sukuna himself in power. But here's the really weird twist, because the great vengeful spirit that is named in the series, Sugawara no Michizane, is also said to be an ancestor to Yuta Okotsu and Satoru Gojo. Now, it's weird enough to find out that these actually share a family tree, because if 2 of the 4 current special grade sorcerers are descendant of this one great vengeful spirits, then are other powerful sorcerers in the world also connected to these 3 figures? Will we actually ever get to meet any of these supreme beings in the actual story? The perfect place to introduce us to Sugawara no Michizane and the other vengeful spirits would be in a Heian era flashback. Japan's Heian era was known as the golden age of Jujutsu sorcery, and there's a reason that most of the incarnated sorcerers in the culling game actually stomped the average combatant from the modern day. Figures from the ancient past like Tengen, Sukuna, and Kenjaku are seemingly just built completely differently when you don't factor in special grade sorcerers. A Heian era flashback has so much that it could possibly show and explain to us. What was Tengen and Kenjaku's relationship like 1000 years ago, and how did things go sideways? Were they the Gojo x Geto of their age? What was Sukuna like in his prime? What evil deeds, beside the cannibalism of course, made him into the king of curses? Gege could also show us what all of the incarnated sorcerers like Hajime Kasimo were actually like back in their first lives, with so many important events happening that set the current story in motion. He might just have to give us one of the coolest extended flashbacks in manga history. And a Heian era flashback could also give us more detail on yet another character's ancestry, because everybody knows that Yuji's mother is Kenjaku. I mean, it was the very first thing in this iceberg, but what's the deal with Yuji's father? Was he just a random guy, or was there a specific reason that Kenjaku actually chose to get it on with Jin Itadori? In particular, there is a theory online that the Itadori bloodline is actually made up of direct descendants of Sukuna. Because on one level, the true form of Sukuna does kind of look like Wasuke Itadori, who is Yuji's grandfather. And if you took Yuji's grandfather's face and just got rid of a few wrinkles, added another pair of eyes here and there, and then set him down in the tattoo chair for a couple of hours maybe, then bam! You've pretty much got yourself a Sukuna. Now, this would also explain A, why Kenjaku chose Itadori in particular, as well as B, why Yuji makes such a perfectly suited vessel for Sukuna. Because surely, if anybody's going to keep Sukuna on lockdown, it would be his great-great-great-great-great-great-great-great-great-great-grandson. Oh, and while we got Itadori's grandfather at the tattoo parlor, what's with Sukuna's ink in the first place? Besides looking honestly incredibly sick and making for a great TikTok filter apparently, a lot of people who get tattoos like to get one that actually holds a special meaning to them. So was Sukuna just trying to look like a cool guy, or do they hold more significance, or are they even related to some sort of actual power? And one actually super cool theory draws on Gege's Akutami's love for history. Because during Japan's Edo period, criminals would be marked with tattoos in a practice called irezumike, literally tattoo punishment. A tattoo on the arm would signify stealing, and a forehead tattoo would mean that you murdered someone, and Sukuna has plenty of both. And this practice actually lasted until the Meiji period, when tattoos were actually completely banned altogether for several years, and while tattoos are once again legal in Japan, they still carry a taboo and some association with crime and especially the Yakuza. Yet another theory is that these tattoos aren't just for looks, instead they're connected to his to-be-determined curse technique. And the idea goes that Sukuna actually stores different techniques of cursed tools within his tattoos, which would be one reasonable explanation for why he can access so many abilities. Hana Kuruzu is another character who was introduced during the culling game. Much like Yuji, she shares a body with a very powerful sorcerer. However, in this case, instead of being extremely evil like Sukuna, Angel is, well, angelic. She's so nice, in fact, that she decides to share Hana's body instead of forcibly suppressing her consciousness like most other incarnated sorcerers did. And a primary goal of the culling game centered around Yuji and Megumi searching for Angel due to her amazing ability of being able to extinguish other curse techniques, including being able to break the seal on the prison realm in order to free Gojo. However, when they finally meet Hana, she appears to know Megumi Fushiguro already. In fact, she does seem to have quite the crush on him, which Angel teases her for a lot. Now, it doesn't seem very likely that this was love at first sight, so what past connection do these sorcerers actually share? And now that Megumi's body has been stolen by Sukuna, how will they ever make things work between them? And before we dive into the next tier, let's end this one with two more really fun pop culture references in JJK. Well, the first one is less of a reference and more of a pop culture inspiration, and it's not from JJK, it's from YYH, the classic series by Yoshihiro Togashi, YuYu Hakusho. And it's already clear that Gege is a big fan of YuYu Hakusho because one of the techniques that Yuji wishes he could use is Yusuke Uremeshi's famous spirit gun attack. However, one of the main characters of the story is actually inspired by a villain from YuYu Hakusho. That's because Geto Suguru actually takes a lot of inspiration from Shinobu Sensei, the antagonist of YuYu Hakusho's Chapter Black arc. Shinobu Sensei was a spirit detective before Yusuke and turned to the dark side after he watched the most evil VHS tape in the world. Just like Sensui, Geto was once a Jujutsu sorcerer fighting on the side of the good guys, who then became the ultimate villain fighting against them. And this part might be a stretch, but it was eventually revealed that Sensui had multiple personalities living inside of him, and this could be similar to how Geto's body was eventually taken over by Kenjaku. And yet another pop culture reference to a Shonen Jump series is to one of Jujutsu Kaisen's own contemporaries and competitors, Demon Slayer. One of the Culling Game's incarnated sorcerers is called Hagane Daido, a master swordsman from the Culling Game. Now, to be fair, he's essentially a gag character, though he's a gag character who is insanely strong. Finding himself in modern day Japan, he was mortified to find that katana are currently illegal in Japan. And so the man searched far and wide for a sword that he could use against Culling Game opponents, but had no luck. Finally, he then did find a katana, and the only problem is that it was a toy replica of Tanjiro's Nichirin sword from Kimetsu no Yaiba. In fact, when he presses a button, it even shouts Ichi no kata, first form, water surface slash. But what's even more weird than that is that truly eagle-eyed fans realized then that this actually created a bit of a time paradox within Jujutsu Kaisen. As you might or might not know, Jujutsu Kaisen actually canonically takes place back in 2018. However, Demon Slayer didn't get its anime adaptation until 2019, so who knows whose voice is coming out of that sword? However, Akutami actually commented on this, telling fans to just ignore this one mistake, please. Nobody is perfect. And it's a really sweet little Easter egg. But now it's time for the deepest, the darkest, and most terrifying depths that Jujutsu Kaisen have to offer. Because next, we're going straight into the realm of curses. Tier 5. In chapter 160 in the manga, we can see Kenjaku removing civilians from his barriers prior to the beginning of the Culling Game. He comes to them in their dreams and allows them the opportunity to escape the bloodshed. In particular, we see him guiding Sasaki, Yuji's friend from the occult club. And one line that Kenjaku says is especially strange here. He's not just appearing to people in their dreams, instead he stated that they are in the cursed realm, a place between dreams and reality. So what exactly is the cursed realm? Is this the place where curses come from? Is it where sorcerers draw their energy from? And more importantly, why can Kenjaku just go for casual strolls through that realm when it seems completely inaccessible to any other sorcerers that we've met so far? And is the cursed realm the same as the afterlife, or is it something completely different? I mean, after Gojo's death, for example, he reunites with several other deceased characters, so is this the actual cursed realm, or is something completely different? Is it just a little flashback he has? Guys, I mean, I don't know how to say this, but Ryomen Sukuna is real, apparently? Because apparently he was a real living figure in Japan who has been mythologized from being a man to being a monster. In the Nihon Shoki, a very old and very important historical book translated as the Chronicles of Japan, allegedly documenting how Japan was formed and its history, Ryomen Sukuna is described as having 4 arms and 4 legs. And I guess Gege couldn't get that particular design feature to look good on the page, so it was just 2 arms. But this legendary real Sukuna apparently also had 2 faces, and not just in the sense that he loves betrayal, he just actually had 2 faces. So probably this is where Gege Akutami took inspiration for his extra pair of eyes. And while the historical Sukuna was feared by some, he was also loved and worshipped by many. And it's even thought that he's a secret deity worshipped at the Minashi Jinja shrine in the Hida province. In interviews, Gege has also stated that Sukuna was also inspired by an urgent legend about a mummified corpse matching this description. The story goes that anyone who looked upon this mummified body with 2 faces, 4 arms, and 4 legs would be cursed with extreme misfortune or even death. And wherever the body was kept would experience terrible calamity. And so we have to ask, what other clues to Sukuna's backstory and motivations might the real-life Sukuna actually hide? In the current story, Kenjaku inhabits the body of Geto Suguru, a special grade sorcerer who stands as one of the strongest of his era. However, if such a big point has been made to demonstrate Kenjaku's body hopping ability, that seems like a pretty big indicator that this brain hasn't hopped for the last time. And after being decapitated by Yuta, Kenjaku's brain now has the perfect opportunity to change hosts. However, who will that new body be, provided he's not actually dead, that is? While Gege loves actually killing off characters, we have a feeling that one of the main villains, or the main villain, won't probably go down that easily. For one, the comedian Takaba's corpse is right there for the taking, which would give Kenjaku the power to turn anything he finds amusing into reality. It would be truly dangerous since Kenjaku is a villain with a serious sense of humor who can perform stand-up with the best of them. And of course, Gege loves to inflict unparalleled pain to his audience, so which body would make us hate Kenjaku the most? Would he dare to make him take up residence in Gojo's Delect torso? Or maybe he'd make us all take a hammer to our computer and or TV screens by removing Nobara's body from cold storage and turning our favorite girl into an eye patch wearing menace. Or who knows, maybe he'll finally combine with Sukuna so that we can finally reduce our two main villains into one single entity. When Kenjaku reveals his master plan for the culling game, we see a map of the barriers that he's placed around Japan. And if his goal is completed, then every non-sorcerer in Japan will merge with Master Tengen and create a new life form beyond that of humanity or cursed spirits. Except it turns out that only actually applies to a part of Japan, because suspiciously cut off of the map here is Hokkaido, Japan's second largest island and its most northern prefecture. And this is especially unusual because in Jujutsu Kaisen 0, Gojo makes a reference to an Ainu Jujutsu school. Ainu, in case you don't know, are the indigenous people of Hokkaido. So we can assume that this third Jujutsu school would be located on the islands. However, they're just completely left out of Kenjaku's equation here. In fact, there's a whole world of Jujutsu sorcery still out there that we have yet to explore, given that JJK0 also introduces us to Miguel, a sorcerer from Kenya. So I for one can't wait for the day after Jujutsu Kaisen ends, when Jujutsu Kaisen, the world tour, is hopefully finally announced. Tengen is clearly hiding some deep, dark secrets, and I'm not just talking about a gender reveal party like in Tier 1 on the Iceberg. After Kenjaku defeats Chozo and Yuki and reaches Tengen, he stated that they shouldn't have trusted Tengen in the first place. According to Kenjaku, their master was actually hiding something very big from them, but unfortunately, Gege still hasn't told us exactly what secret that might be. Kenjaku has given us some hints. He stated that even though he's the mastermind of the culling games, he's not the game master. In fact, he suggests that Tengen is the real game master, having erected the barriers that Kenjaku took advantage of for the game. But is that it, or is Tengen way more involved than meets the eye? Perhaps back when they were friends a millennium ago, Tengen was the one who actually came up with the culling game idea in the first place. Who knows, maybe he even held his own culling games back in the Heian era and Sukuna was the original winner. So really, this is just one more reason why we really need that Heian era flashback. Tengen being involved a lot more here could explain why she hasn't given the other sorcerers more information on Kenjaku's plan, which she presumably knew something about since Kenjaku has been working towards this goal for literal centuries. The Jujutsu Society is led primarily by three big families: the Kamo, the Zain, and the Gojo. Each of these families exists as a pillar holding up the delicate balance that is the Jujutsu world, and when they're not being slaughtered by a jaded Maki, that is. Now, these families maintain the importance of keeping their bloodlines pure and untainted, which on top of being a kind of gross example of eugenics, is also a gross suggestion of incest. In fact, if we examine the Zain family tree closely enough, it would appear that Naobito married his cousin and that Maki and Mei are actually products of that marriage. Some people even speculate that Mei is a member of the Gojo clan based on her white hair color and eye-related curse technique that allows her to share side with her birds. And being part of one of the big three families would explain her uncomfortably close relationship with her little brother. And of course, on the topic of really messed up family trees, let's also talk about Panda, because he's a mutated cursed corpse brought to life through Principal Yaga's curse technique. Within him exist 3 separate cores that belong to his siblings and grant him access to different transformation and abilities. And so within Panda lives his brother Gorilla and his sister Triceratops. But here's where it gets really messed up though. You see, when we see his backstory, we're treated to a panel showing a funeral arrangement for 3 deceased people. And it's kind of heavily implied that Panda and his siblings could actually be stillborn triplets, possibly the children of Principal Yaga himself. In fact, the principal of the Kyoto Jujutsu High School mentions that Panda is able to function only because his 3 cores are extremely compatible, which you would think the souls of triplets would probably be. So does our lovable furry friend actually have one of the most twisted and tragic backstories in all of JJK, with their own father resurrecting his own dead 3 children? Everyone, if you'll excuse me for a moment, it's time for some copium. Some huge, extreme gigacopium, please. The first time one of the 3 main characters of Jujutsu Kaisen died was at the very beginning of the series when Sukuna tore out Yuji's heart. Megumi and Kugisaki were left thinking that he was dead when in reality Gojo was training the supposedly dead Yuji in secret so that he'd be able to hold his own in upcoming battles. That's why it's clear that the only reason we haven't gotten official confirmation either way about Nobara's death is because she's just been on her massive training arc, right? That's right. Nobara isn't dead. I mean, what kind of mangaka would be heartless enough to kill one of the main trio before she even got to have any true character-defining moments, right? Any day now, I'm convinced when things are looking really bleak, Nobara will show up with a cool eye patch, having quintupled her power levels in secret, and then she'll totally rub it into Yuji's face as revenge for when he did the same to her. So yeah, that's right. Nobara will be back and stronger than ever. Please, Gege. Please, right? And while we're at it, Gojo's not really in half. He's the strongest. Don't you remember when Yuji asked if he would win in a fight against Sukuna and Gojo said that he would win? You know, it's like a huge meme and everything now. Well, clearly he wouldn't lose to Sukuna. His limitless ability means nothing can touch him. Even if Mahoraga tag team against him with Sukuna and the adaptation ability let him get past Gojo's technique. Because obviously while the rest of the gang is holding Sukuna off, Gojo is about to use his reverse technique and his 6 eyes powers to totally regenerate his body. I mean, maybe since he's in 2 halves right now, both parts will recover and we'll be lucky enough to have 2 Gojos. And now I'm not coping, you're coping. The curses in JJK aren't just fiction, at least one of them is extremely real. And just by reading the manga, you might be cursed yourself. What is the curse that affects every single person who reads JJK? Well, other than the "that character definitely shouldn't have died" curse. Well, that's of course the reading comprehension curse. Because not since Hunter x Hunter have I seen so many walls of text explaining stuff in a manga. For some chapters, Gege might as well just save ink by skipping the pictures altogether and just give us a few pages to read of raw text. Anytime there's a chapter that explains the intricacies of the Heian era legal system or the rules and statistics that go into a themed pachinko machine, you might as well send me back to 2nd grade because all of my powers of reading comprehension disappear and I'm kind of left staring at the page as drool begins forming around my mouth. But of course, don't worry, because if you or a loved one has been affected by the reading comprehension curse as well, there is still hope for you out there. Because all you need to do is check out this video that in easy to understand words explains the entire Jujutsu Kaisen power system, and you'll be following all of this series' complex fights in no time. Thank you so much for sticking with me until the end. I hope you had a good time exploring this, and I hopefully see you in the next one.